Sadhu Sadhu Lumpo. I'm sorry, I can't turn my video on because last night I fell off in the bathroom and I had some ointment on my shoulders. Uh, Bante, I would like to ask one question. When I'm doing meditation, I'm coming to a place that very serene and very very peaceful. But at that time, at that particular very time, some stupid thought comes to the mind and it disturbs my peacefulness. So how can I go and how can I overcome that situation? Thank you, Ajahn. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Well, you're certainly not alone. I've had my own fair share of stupid thoughts arising when I'm about to be peaceful, and I think everyone else has as well. It's the most normal thing for a meditator to have to deal with. So first thing is have a good attitude and accept. We've all made our own karma in the past. We've all had stupid thoughts before, done stupid things, and so memories and thoughts will come up again as we're meditating. But try and learn from it every time and catch it, as you're about to start thinking those thoughts or you've started thinking, your aim is to try and bring up the awareness again, question yourself, what am I doing here? Why am I thinking these stupid thoughts? Are these the path? Are these helping me to realize the Dhamma? Can I just let this go? Can I be strong enough, brave enough just to let it go and not think it, not carry on thinking it? That's your overall goal, is to see it's an impermanent thought. What's impermanent is not a self. It's not really you. It's just a condition of mind, a mental state. You may have had it before, but your aim is to bring up enough awareness to say, this is just a thought. I can let it go. And I can let it go. You've let go of thoughts before. I'm going to do it again. So however your mind is clinging to it, however much importance your mind gives to it as something you really have to think about it, however foolish, unskillful it is, your mind is saying, I want to think this, I'm going to have to think this. Try and get to that point where you can have another part of your mind say, no, I don't need to think this. I can let it go. I've let go of this before. If I let go, I'm going to be more mindful, more peaceful, more happy. So you're giving yourself permission to let go, whatever way you can achieve that. So sometimes a little bit of contemplation, sometimes just firmness of mind, and no, I'm not going to go there. And you come back to the breath or come back to that state of mindfulness. There's many ways the Buddha gave for removal of distracting thoughts. One is just willpower. Grind your teeth together, stick your tongue at the top of your mouth, just willpower. Sometimes we have to replace it. So if it's a foolish thought, some anger or some lust or some confusion in one way or another, try and bring up the opposite. You recognize the unskillfulness of that way of thinking and bring your mind back to the opposite. Sometimes you just establish mindfulness on your object, like the breath. There's always a few different options you can use, and that's part of the skill of the meditator, is that, as you become more mindful, you realize what works for you. What has worked for me before? How did I knock this out of my mind before? So one of the pictures the Buddha gave is, knocking a peg out with another peg. So the first peg is like that foolish thought you're stuck on. You get another peg and you knock it out. We can do that sometimes with other thoughts, other wiser thoughts or useful ways of thinking can knock out the first one. So if you're attracted to something, say it's lust for another person or some object of lust, something that brings up desire, that's attractive, beautiful, contemplate the unattractive side of that same thing to balance your mind, to loosen the obsession with what is attractive. If it's anger, you can bring up metta. You knock the anger out by focusing your mind on metta. So that's your job, is to look for ways to let go of these thoughts and to be patient, with the fact that they do come up at the most annoying times.
Sadhu Longpo. Next, I would like to invite Bingwa to ask the next question.
Hello, Longpo, can you hear me?
Yes.
You asked us to recollect what we have done from the beginning of the rains retreat. It's been almost, I would say, 6 weeks. And I think the practice has been for me, has been very rewarding. I set a pattern of my practice to begin with listening to the Dhamma every morning and followed by meditation. I just wanted to ask Longpo the question of how do I deepen my meditation practice. I'd like to share that when I do my breath meditation, I have a sense of calmness, almost like a light feeling, and then around me there is a radiance, and it's a beautiful feeling. And yet in my mind all the time I tell myself not to cling to this feeling, and instead I use the radiance to actually practice metta meditation. In other words, sending the metta to myself, to those that I know. Hello?
Yep, I can hear.
To those close to me who are suffering at the moment, with various stages of cancer, receiving chemotherapy, and then I continue to use the radiance, the energy, to send out, in the meditation. And I just wanted to ask from Longpo, how does one actually go beyond that? In other words, beyond the samadhi, the deep concentration, to deepen one's meditation practice. Thank you.
Well, if you found what you're doing is generally working, that's a good start. And so first thing would just be to continue doing what you're doing already, maintain it, continue it. One way we can deepen our practice is increasing the amount of time. Is a pretty obvious thing. So if you can sit meditation or walk meditation for a period of time, you've been doing regularly for the last 6 weeks, well, you can try for the next 6 weeks maybe to do a little bit more. That may be one thing you can consider. Another thing is to contemplate. Like you were saying, build on that understanding that even the state of mindfulness, samadhi, the radiance of the mind is not self. It's not something to be clinged to. It's a condition, or what we call a sankhara. It's part of the path, but we also have to recognize it's impermanent, it's not self. And keep developing that contemplation out from the meditation into other aspects of your life. So come back firstly to your own physical body, contemplate, well, that's not self. This body is aging. It will one day get old to the point of death, and then I have to let it go. So keep reflecting on that, the impermanence of your own body and the fact that it isn't something you can control. It's just the four elements that will eventually separate and go their own separate ways. And similarly with the people, like you were saying, you're spreading metta to friends who have cancer, which is a very good thing to do. But before you finish those meditations, also contemplate their bodies are not self. You spread the metta to try and give them some support, good feeling in any way you can, but you also have to accept they will one day die and separate from you through death. All conditions are impermanent. So our body is impermanent, your friends' bodies are impermanent, life is impermanent in that sense. Keep contemplating that so that you don't cling to anything too much. It doesn't mean to say stop practicing or give up on life. It's not to make you depressed, but to keep reflecting on the impermanence of everything you're involved with, your physical body, your home, the people you love. One day you must separate from them all. So your mind is constantly seeing impermanence, and therefore it won't get caught into the sadness or the loss or the fear that normally human beings do get caught into. This is the antidote to it, the contemplation of impermanence.
Next, we would like to invite Matthew to ask the next question. Matthew, please.
Hi, good evening, Lompo. I moved back my mom in March, so I have a difficult relationship with my mother. I mean, I witnessed my parents fight when they were when most of my life. And usually my mom is quite an unkind person. Like, I know that it comes from her abusive childhood. Now things are better. You know, my mom is a widow. But my mom says really unkind things to me sometimes. And she's always cleaning the house all the time. Like, it's very noisy at home. So hers, I explode in rage, and I feel sad, and the rage is very uncontrollable. Like, I break things, I shout at her with vulgarities. So there's a lot of suffering for me, because, you know, at the back of my mind is like, oh no, not again. Like, why are you tormenting me? You know, like, I don't know what I did in my past life for you to torment me. So, Longpo, you got any advice? Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, I think what you're describing is quite a common situation. Maybe you've got it worse than many people, but we have all had some difficulty living with parents, living with other people at home, because we're all still unenlightened. We've still got our own attachments, our own delusions, confusion. So the Buddha gave many practices, you might say, on different levels or in different ways to deal with these things. So the first one would be maybe just to work on what you think is the worst aspect of your behavior. Like, where you can change things is for yourself. It's going to be difficult for you to change your mum, but you may be able to change your mum for the better by changing yourself. So I would focus first on making that determination, I'm going to change myself for the better. And then maybe, first of all, just look at the externals, like you say. So, you know, your mum does things that puts you in a rage sometimes. Okay, that's understandable. But you can also see that you don't want to act on that. You don't want to hurt her. You don't want to hurt anybody. So see, maybe if you can make some simple rules for yourself. When I get angry, I'm not going to take it out by physically breaking things or verbally abusing my mum. I'm going to try and establish what we call precepts, sila. So that doesn't mean to say you're expecting not to get angry. You know, you might get angry in different situations, but you now have a strategy so that if you get angry, first thing you're going to do is make that decision or uphold a decision you've already made. I'm not going to act on this. I'm not going to speak or act out this anger and destroy things, damage things, or hurt people's feelings. Now make that your first goal. So it's your external behavior, your external conduct, not to harm others through your speech, your actions. So you have you know, if I was in your position, you know, I've had problems with my mum when I was younger, so I have a little bit of experience. That was how I dealt with it. I mean, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to not take out my anger on another person or on a physical object breaking things, and just keep working on that, practicing that every day. Re-establish the determination every morning when you get up. You know, however angry I feel, I'm not going to take it out on her or another person or on breaking things. And you make that a goal, your goal for the day. It doesn't have to be for many days. You just do one day at a time. Today, I am not going to let my anger come out in my behavior and be destructive against another person or a material thing. And see if you can do that for a period of time, 7 days, 15 days, 1 month, and then review it. Like today, I've been talking about a review. Like, review, how's it been going? Did you manage to do it and not take your anger out by breaking things or swearing or saying harsh words? Did I manage to do it? If you did, how do you feel about that? Do you feel good when you achieve a whole day without doing those things? If you feel it as a good thing and you can see, well, you can say that's some progress in your life. And once you can do it one day, you know you can do it, well, then you have to build on that. So that's one part of it, just getting a strategy, a plan in place that you keep reaffirming every morning, say, I'm not going to break things because it's destructive, it's pointless taking out my anger, breaking things. I'm not going to say harsh words against my mum. So you make that plan. And another plan is the more positive side is, you know, every morning I would say, again, get up, establish in your heart, however bad my mum is, whatever she does that annoys me, she's still my mum. She brought me into the world. I wouldn't be with her here without her. She's fed me, clothed me, loved me, even though she has habits that I don't agree with or that I find annoying. Remind yourself every day of the goodness of your mum. If you want to put it in simple terms, mum is God, or mum is the queen. Treat her like the queen, the God, whatever. Even though she may be annoying to you, even though she says and does things that annoy you, try and get that perception is that she's still done so much good for you to get you to where you are in your life right now, that's more important than the annoying things. And focus on that, because if you focus on the good of your mother, the annoying side of her character will become less important to you. So it's something you have to do as an ongoing practice. Every morning, remind yourself the good that your mum's done. Really think about it. Remind yourself, learn from your past. So that will help you get the right attitude. Is okay, so however bad she can be, however annoying she can be, she knows how to press my buttons, say those words that really get me angry or do those things that get me angry. She's still my mother. She still brought me into the world. And I'm going to work on my anger more than I'm going to work on her. So you've got the external practice of not giving into the desire to harm through your speech, your actions. And then you've got the internal practice, becoming aware of your anger more and more and letting it go and replacing it with more tolerance and kindness. I know it's easy for me to say, but actually I've practiced in this way as well, and many, many people I know have, and they've all found very good results. One thing you might bear in mind, like the Buddha, obviously you probably heard this, talked about how much our parents do for us, and this is not on the level of their character and their views on things. It's more just the fact that they brought us into the world, fed us, brought us up. That's such an important, valuable thing, good thing in our life that we really shouldn't turn against them. So like when you turn against your parents, you're turning against the goodness in your own heart as well as in their heart. It's not the solution. Anger doesn't end anything well. It only destroys things and makes things worse. It's like feeding a fire. So keep coming back to remembering the goodness of your parents, and then seeing the real problem is actually your angry reactions more than your parents' behavior. And this isn't to excuse you if your parents are doing things that are wrong, bad, okay, that's something they have to deal with. But you're not the one to sort that out, really. You've got to sort out your own anger. So you get the balance right, the perspective right in your mind, that the problem is really my angry action. That's what I have to subdue, learn from, understand, and let go. And you can do that. One thing you can even do is every time your mum is doing something that annoys you, find a few moments for yourself, get to your room or get to a space where you can just sit down and say, the problem is my anger. It's not my mum. And get that understanding going and get it there in your mind every day. So gradually you're starting to let go of your anger rather than think too much about your mum. Your mum is just your mum. You can't change her much, so don't bother about that. Just let her be. Let her get on with her life. Let her, wish in your heart, may she be happy, maybe she well, may she be well, but I'm going to work with my own heart to free my own heart from my anger. And you may even reach a point where one day your mum makes you or does something that makes you angry, and you can say, aha, I've seen this anger. My mum is actually helping me to let go of my anger. And it changes the whole dynamic. Instead of seeing your mum as the enemy, as the problem, you're seeing your anger as a problem, and your mum is simply showing you your problem. So she's actually helping you. It sounds weird, I know, but if you keep doing it, you might get to that point, and then you'll be very happy to be with your mum. And it's like, oh, mum is doing what she does and I'm getting angry. This is good. I can let go of some more anger today. Wow. Maybe by living with my mum, I'll actually let go of all my anger quicker. Because what we tend to do is say, I want to be somewhere where nobody bothers me, nobody does anything that annoys me. But when you get that, often you're not seeing your attachments. You're just sort of indulging your desires, and you don't grow so much as a human. You still remain very fragile and easily prone to anger when you get into those situations. So if you're in a situation where you can't avoid someone, say your mother, just learn from it. Say, oh, this is a good opportunity to learn about my own attachment to getting what I want, and she's not giving me what I want, so I'm getting angry. But really the problem is my frustrated desires. It's not her, it's inside me. Try and see that dynamic, see what's going on.
Long Paul, do you have time for 3 more questions? They are written.
Not a problem.
Okay. The first question is from Kamala. She has 2 questions. So the first one is, can we say any sense consciousness, eye or ear consciousness, is basically just part of mind consciousness because it takes a functional brain and mind consciousness to be able to feel or know any sense contact?
Well, the mind is the mind, and the mind is separate from the body, but it's linked. And all the sense contact we have through the body, so like seeing, hearing, tasting, comes to the mind. That's why we call it, seeing consciousness, hearing consciousness. So the mind is like at the center, and it receives all those images or sounds or impressions from the senses. But the mind is separate in the sense it's not absolutely dependent on the body. In the sense you could be, if you develop the arupa jhanas, you're born in a realm where you have no body and you still have a mind. So ultimately speaking, the mind and the body are separate things, but they're linked and they work together. So if you develop deep jhana, you might even understand this from experience. I'm not saying it's easy, but 4th jhana, you can separate your mind from the body, and then you can definitely say, oh, the brain is not the seat of the mind. The mind and the brain are not the same thing. But when we don't have much mindfulness and awareness or samadhi, you tend to feel like mind and body are all one thing. When you think, it seems like the brain is thinking, and so on. You have this sense that it's all one solid thing. So we need to investigate this until we can at least see that nama, mind, rupa, body are separate. And whenever you're continuously mindful, then that starts to emerge. That kind of understanding starts to become clear.
Thank you, Luang Por. The second question is, some say plants grow better when playing music, classical music to them or speak to them. If plants don't have consciousness, then what do they have? Do they have physical sensations? Thank you.
Well, they're living organisms. Is it organism? No, maybe not organism. They're living. They're alive, biologically alive. You know, they have cells. Cells are very sensitive things. They're sensitive to light. Obviously, plants require light from the sun. They require water. So part of that sensitivity means they may be sensitive to their environment. They certainly, you know, you see in a forest, an untouched forest, plants seem to grow well and they help each other. When you start interfering with a forest, you know, people burn them, they log, they remove plants. All of the plants seem to do worse. So the environment does seem to affect plants. So even though they don't have consciousness, they are affected by their surroundings. And so if you're somebody who is more caring, you're a gardener or a potted plant lover, maybe that care and attention you give it will help it. Having said that, with all the care and attention in the world, there are other factors that do affect plants. We know that here because we're in the mountains and it's cold, and we plant things and sometimes they die. And you plant, get the lay people to plant something and you water it and look after it, and then it just dies on you. So, you know, even if you do speak nicely to it, meditate for it, wish it well, it can still die. So don't be too surprised. You know, there's many factors that affect the life of plants, not just people. If it's trees, well, we're aware from the time of the Buddha to the present, you know, trees can be the dwelling place of devas. Beings, celestial beings. So sometimes the deva has a lot of good energy that can help the tree, and so trees can be very healthy. And so people with the divine eye can see a deva in a tree and they know, oh, that tree is benefiting from the presence of a deva. So as Buddhist monks, we have all kinds of rules about how we should live in the forest. Like we shouldn't go to the toilet at the foot of a tree, because it may affect the devas living there. We're not allowed to harm trees, cut the branches, cut them down, because it may harm the deva or annoy the deva. So devas and trees do seem to go together and they can affect each other. I always remember there's an interesting story when Ajahn Chah was ill. He went to Bangkok for a number of occasions to have operations and treatment. And he spent some of his time in a kuti in the back garden of a house of a lay supporter, and that kuti had been built for monks. So it was an appropriate place for him to stay and recover. And outside this kuti was a tree. It's a kind of frangipani tree, one of those kind of tropical trees with the big flowers. And he actually died, or seemed to die, but it was left standing. It wasn't cut down for many years. And then Ajahn Chah went to stay in that kuti. And while he was staying there, that tree started to flower and sprout leaves again after many, many years of being dormant. And they all thought it had died, and it started to become alive again. And everyone said, oh, you see, it's the metta of Luang Por Chah, the devas have come, the good energy, and the tree is flourishing. So plants do seem to, you know, be affected sometimes by these things, but I'd say it was only one factor, and not probably the most important factor. You know, the most important factor is things like soil and water, that kind of thing.
Sadhu, Luang Por. We have the last question now from Ray Fang. Dear Ajahn, how do I deal with perfectionism, which sometimes lead to unwholesome anxieties I find myself feeling tense and finding it hard to relax at work. Kindly advise, Ajahn.
Was the word protectionism?
Perfectionism.
Perfectionism, sorry. Yes. Oh, well, yes. This is a big problem in our world because our culture encourages, it's a culture of perfectionism. And what is perfect for one person may be different from another, but still we have this sort of desire, you might call it bhavadanha, the desire of becoming. We want to become something. We want to make our life, our world perfect in our own mind's eye, according to our desires, our clinging. So it's coming from ignorance. And so even Buddhists have this problem, like you have the Buddha, you might say is perfect. He's somebody who's without mental defilements, who's completely wise, compassionate, peaceful, and pure. So that's one idea of perfection. Then we look back at ourselves and we say, well, I'm still full of anger and greed and all kinds of mental defilements. I'm hopeless. And so even attachment to the idea of an enlightened being can be a form of attachment to an ideal of perfection that we then look back at ourselves and it becomes a cause of suffering, doesn't it? So that's what you're looking at, is how to use ideals skillfully, hold on to them skillfully to help give you a goal and an idea of where you're going in your practice and your life, but not to hold so tightly that it becomes like a weapon that you hurt yourself with over and over again by comparing yourself to your idea of perfection and then feeling disappointed, depressed, self-critical, and so on. So that's part of our practice, is to look more closely, to be mindful, be aware, and to reflect on what is driving you, and to catch yourself when you're becoming too perfectionist, like you say. What exposes it is the suffering. So, you probably have the idea, I should be perfectly trained in the 5 precepts. So then you say some harsh word, or you tell a small lie, or you kill some ants, and you feel, I'm hopeless, I can't do it. What we tend to do with perfectionism is we attach so much to the ideal that any little small imperfection is immediately exposed and a cause for us to feel very negative about ourselves or the world and feel very down. And we become out of balance, because what often, say with the 5 precepts, you might have this idea, I should keep the 5 precepts perfectly every day. And maybe for 364 days of the year, you do that, more or less. And then the one day you don't, you fail, that becomes what you attach to, and you get really annoyed with yourself and feel you can't practice, and triggers all kinds of negativity because of your ideal of perfection. Then you're missing all the good stuff and forgetting all the good stuff you did before. And that works on the level of dana, sila, meditation. We focus so much on the negative because we've attached so strongly to the perfection and the ideal of perfection. So try and have develop a more balanced view and notice the good as well as the bad, so that your perfectionism doesn't lead to this endless self-criticism. It doesn't mean to say to ignore your faults and where you're becoming caught into craving and attachment in your thinking or whatever, but balance it up with all the good that you're doing as well. And the same with other people. If we're really perfectionists, we want our world, our life, our workplace, our home to be this way, then maybe somebody else isn't living up to our ideals, so we get annoyed with them. And maybe they do some very small little thing wrong or out of line with our idea of perfection. And we become really angry and upset with them. Just as we can become self-critical, we become critical of that person. And they do one small thing wrong, and maybe most of the time they're not doing things wrong, they're fine, but we pick up on the one wrong thing and we build it up in our mind and maybe over-exaggerate it or overreact to what they're doing. And you see this sometimes in Buddhist circles, where people have their idea of how things should be in a Buddhist center or in their practice of meditation or in the monastery. And then someone comes along and they're not practicing quite properly yet. And so they become very negative on that person. And they're not seeing really the trigger of it is their attachment to the ideal, the perfect ideal of perfection. And so sometimes a bit of more metta and compassion can help as well, more mindfulness, awareness of our intentions and what's going on if we are becoming angry with someone else, sometimes we have to come back and say, if you see a fault in someone else, come back first and say, do I have that fault? Oh yes, I also have that fault. And so I'm not going to get so angry with them because I realize I'm also working with this fault. They're working with it, I'm working with it. So you have to be able to do this, to reflect on the ideals you hold, the views you hold on the world, and you can use them as skillful tools, but don't hold so tightly that it becomes a cause of more unnecessary suffering for you or taking out on other people. The world is not perfect, it's imperfect. That's one of the meanings of dukkha. So if you're looking for a perfect world, you're going to be disappointed. You're always going to be disappointed, annoyed, angry. And perfection comes in the mind, and so look back in here, and it's understanding the nature of dukkha, its cause, and then letting go of the cause. That's where you can find some perfection. But the world as a whole is always going to be a little bit imperfect, isn't it? It's never going to look as clean as it should be, as neat and tidy as it should be. It's not always going to provide perfect justice for every individual. The imperfections of the world are there for us to learn from, but we can't fix everything.
We've come to the end of the session. Thank you, Long Po, for taking time out from your retreat to guide us and to give us encouragement on the practice. So to end off the session, we'll have Darren to lead us with the closing homage. Darren, please.
ขอการครับอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธภะคะวาพุทธังภะคะวันตังอะภิวาเทมิ สวากขาโตภะคะวะตาธัมโมธัมมังนัมมัสสามิ สุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนัมมามิ